All right, good morning, everybody. You guys are truly the die-hard students. My hat's off to all of you guys for coming out. It is miserable out there today. I did not want to come to class today, I have to admit. No offense to you guys, but they pay me, so I kind of have to. Okay, so here's where we're at. So this is the Moodle website. This is today. Hopefully, everyone in here, except for the very few of you that have your laptops open right now, have your assignments submitted. There are 13 brave souls out there yet that are still working on their assignment. So if you have not turned it in and you just realize that it's due today, then you might want to do that by the end of class is when it's due, 9:15. Also coming up on the radar, let's see, we have, obviously we have class today, we have class Tuesday, and a week from today is exam number 2, okay? So just make sure that's on, on your calendar. It's coming up. We will likely, so today we're on chapter 10. We'll probably get through chapter 10 today, and 11 is a rather short one. So we'll probably get through chapter 11 before the second exam. So the material will cover, what did we get through, 5 or 6 the first time? We went through 1 through 6, right? Where's that exam? Exam 1, yeah, we went through 6. So this one will likely be 7 through 11, okay? I'll update that on the webpage. I'll confirm that on Tuesday, but just to give you guys an idea where we're at. Okay. So last time we kind of left off a slide after this. And I want to go back and I want to reiterate a point here about the difference between hunger and appetite. And the difference is that, again, hunger is a very biological driven thing. You're not so much concerned about what you're going to eat, it's when you're going to eat. You want to eat now, okay? Appetite is a much more psychological thing where there's a lot of social and external inputs into it. And that's more of a, maybe I'm not so much hungry, but I'm going to eat anyway, okay? And the reason I want to mention this, I want to talk, this is a graphic from the book, about some of the factors that feed into this. Now, I'm not going to ask you to get into the details here, but again, hunger is very biological. So when you're hungry, you want to eat, and you want to eat soon. And so there's lots of things that feed into this. So, example, almost every organ in your body communicates with your brain, okay? And so they're going to tell your brain if they're short of energy, for example, and that's going to tell you to eat. The brain itself also senses nutrient levels in the blood, like glucose or insulin, okay? And that'll tell you if you should eat or not. There are a variety of disease states, some on the overweight side, like obesity, and some that we're going to talk about today, like anorexia or cancer cachexia, which are the opposite effects where they keep you from eating, okay? Those all feed in. And then, of course, there's other inputs coming into the brain, such as sight, hearing, smell, all these that will feed into that hypothalamus and ultimately trigger whether or not you eat. Now, the appetite part of this is really more of a what should I eat? And this goes back to when we talked about early in the semester, we talked about factors that influence our diet. Many of these things in here, such as social influences, likes, whether you like the taste, smell, whatever. There's also some disease issues here, but mostly these are environmental or external factors that trigger kind of what you're in the mood for, okay? What food you typically eat. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about body weight and body composition, which obviously is very important. So I mentioned, actually this will be on your second, was this on your second assignment? I can't remember, BMI, you had to calculate BMI, right? So you guys have all hopefully done this, except for those 13 people. Is basically what this is a rough estimate of obesity or body weight, or body composition to some degree, okay? Very rough. And the simple calculation is body weight in kilograms divided by height squared. So typically the higher this number is, the more obese you are. And we typically categorize people as obese if their BMI is above 30. Now, I say this is very a rough estimate because if you think about people that, let's say, are short, okay? But really big. Not big as in fat, but just big as in muscular. You know, we have people that have really wide bodies, as my mom would say, big bone people. You know, these people would have a BMI of maybe 30, 35. but they're not obese, right? So when they use these calculations, which they use because they're easy, you can take body weight and body height really easy, but it's much more complicated to measure body fat on someone or body composition. So that's why these are used. You can get these from about anybody, but they're not that accurate. So some people over here are actually not obese, and some people down here, even though the score might be low, could be obese in theory, okay? So just to keep that in mind. So what BMI ultimately wants to try and get at is how much body fat you have, okay? When we become obese, that's accumulation of body fat. And we talked about before, women typically have more fat than men. So on average, the average woman is between 20 and 35% body fat. The men are much lower, okay? And this is due to a variety of things. So how do we measure body fat? The old school way, which was, I think is kind of fun, but is they actually put people underwater. So they put you in a tank, they make you hold your breath, and they look at the volume of water that is displaced. This is an old physics experiment that you guys probably did in high school, right? You drop something in a big graduated cylinder and you see how much the water moves up. Okay, you can get an idea of the volume of that object. That's the same concept, okay? Problem is it's kind of a pain because you have to have the tank around and it's not something you're going to do very often. How many of you have seen this thing? Maybe at one of the rec centers? Yeah, so I think they have one here on East Bank. I've seen it at the St. Paul gym. This is what we call, this is the bod pod. It looks like they're going to launch you into outer space. They haven't actually done that. But what you do is they go in here, and then it fills with air. It fills with air before you go in. So it measures exactly how much air is in there. Then it opens up, then you get in, and it does the same. And by difference, it can tell how much air you're displacing. Okay? Just like, it's the same concept as the water displacement, except now we're displacing air. Okay? And so from that, we can get a fairly good estimate of body volume and body fat. A very rather simple one, and they do this sometimes at the health center here, is called skin fold thickness. And we'll talk about this in a minute. We store fat in a variety of places in our body, but one of the places we call subcutaneous, so it's right underneath our skin, right? We can all pinch a little fat in various places in our body, right? And so they take this little caliper here, and they pinch, and they see how thick that is. And we know, they've done thousands of these people, and they know people that are this thick have roughly this much body fat, and people that are this thick have this much. So they've kind of done these calculations. Another one is where they actually hook you up to an electrical current, okay? This isn't a car battery and jumper cables, okay? It's not quite so severe. But it's a mild electrical current, and the premise of this is that when electricity runs through water, it runs at a certain speed. But when there's fat there, the fat is a resistance, and so it slows the speed of that electrical current down. And by difference, you can tell how much body fat you have, all right? And this is kind of a pretty easy little thing. You just hook up these little electrodes on each end, and away you go. It's pretty fast. Another one you'll see if you ever volunteer, perhaps for a research study, which there are a ton of them on campus, earn a little extra money, is something that looks like this. And this, this is called a DEXA. It's essentially an X-ray scan. It's a little bit of a spiced up X-ray scan. And what it does is it measures your bones like a normal X-ray, but it's also a little bit different and can measure the soft tissue on your body. And so it can actually quite accurately measure how much body fat you have in your body. All right? Not only bone density. This is used a lot for osteoporosis and bone density type studies, but it's also used for measuring body fat. And of these, it's probably the most widely used and most accurate. Okay? But you don't have one of these sitting in your house, right? Okay, so we talk a lot about obesity, and I've talked a lot about obesity. You hear about it in the news, you hear about it in other classes. And we are programmed, or we are told obesity is a bad thing. And undoubtedly it is, okay? But obesity is not all the same. We have, if you look at everybody that's obese, just say in the US, you have probably roughly half of that obese population that looks, not only are they obese, but they're what we call diseased. So they have cardiovascular disease, they have diabetes, they have hypertension, they have all these complications that go with it. And that's what will ultimately lead to their death. It's not the obesity per se, it's all the other complications that go with it. Now, we also have an obese population that is metabolically healthy, okay? So we have some people walking around that are obese, but if you take a blood sample or look at risk factors for other diseases, they're normal. So why is that? This is a big question for scientists to try and figure out what is protective for some people, why is obesity, and some people it causes all these problems. And one of the prevailing theories, or well, it's probably more than a theory by this point, it's where your fat is located, okay? And we all know we all come in different shapes and sizes, but we can kind of generally classify people into a couple different shapes here. The first, what we call, is an apple shape, and this is where you hold most of your fat in your upper body, okay? So the apple is wider at the top, and you've seen, I put some pictures up, but they can be offensive sometimes. You see these people walking around with really, really skinny legs, right? And then they have that monster beer belly out to here. We've all seen those people, right? That is an apple-shaped person. We call that android obesity, all right? And then we also have a class of people that carry most of their weight below the waist, okay? This is the junk in the trunk. So these are the people with the really slender upper bodies, but they got the thighs, they got the butt, all that going on, all right? So very different distribution of weight. And what we know is, well, first of all, let me go how the fat is stored. So fat is typically stored in two places in our body, and I'm not just talking upper and lower. We have some underneath our skin. That's the stuff we can pinch, right? But then we have stuff inside our internal organs. So if you were to cut somebody open and look around their intestine, their kidneys, various places, there's a lot of fat in there, all right? And that fat is called visceral fat, the inside stuff. The stuff under your skin is called subcutaneous. Very different. And these people up here, as you would imagine, have more of that visceral fat, that internal fat that surrounds your organs. And this is the bad stuff, okay? The stuff that lies under your skin, for example, if you're carrying it below your waist, I mean, you don't really have much for internal organs below your waist, that's all subcutaneous, okay? And this, in many ways, is almost protective. So if you look at people that carry most of their weight down here, very thin upper body, most of the weight down in here, they generally, even though they could be classified as obese, they are probably metabolically healthy. Okay? They're at no greater risk for diabetes, for heart disease, for cancer, for anything else. Any questions on this? How many of you have heard this concept before? So some of you guys. All right. And right now we're still trying to figure out what regulates these different, I mean, clearly we'll talk about genetics in a few minutes here. Genetics is a big factor, but the one thing we do know is things, if you are obese or you're overweight and you carry a lot of this visceral fat inside your tummy, the first weight that typically goes is that type of fat. So if you ever hear somebody say, their doctor says, oh, even if you just lose 5 or 10% of your weight, it's going to be beneficial, even though you might be still obese, you're going to preferentially lose that bad stuff. Okay? And that's why there's that benefit. If you're 400 pounds and you lose 25 pounds, a good chunk of that's going to come from here. And so that'll be a beneficial thing. Yes?
It's not necessarily like men are one way, women are other.
No, so this shows a man and a woman. It's not necessarily gender specific. No, absolutely not.
I was wondering why it says android and
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. No, it's not, though. It's not gender specific. We usually just refer, I mean, typically the way these are called is they use the fruit analogies here, apple or pear. But no, you definitely can have women in this category and men in this category, for sure. I would say there's probably more of a tendency for more women to be this way and more men this way, but it's definitely not exclusive. Okay, so what affects body weight and body composition? So a big one is genes, unfortunately. So love your parents. Roughly, and this is rough, it depends on who you ask, half our body weight is determined, or there's hereditary effects of this, okay? So what your parents pass on to you. And it's not just what your parents pass on to you, it's also things, and we'll talk about this, like what your mom ate when she was pregnant with you, and things going back multiple generations. But many of these things are passed down, okay? And they affect not only fat distribution, but really your metabolism in general, your eating behavior, all of this. So clearly environment is an enormous one, all right? Food availability, economic status, all of these things factor into this whole environmental thing. And we've talked about this multiple times in the class, the interaction between these two. And I think I gave you guys the example before, the Pima Indians, where when they're in Mexico, their rates of diabetes and obesity are low, but when those same people move to the U.S., they become massively obese and diabetic. That's a environment by genetic interaction. And this is without a doubt. Lots of people want to say, oh, we're obese because of certain genes or because it's the environment, but in reality, probably most of the time, it's a combination of the two. And then there's also various diseases, not even full-blown diseases, but just pre-diseases, so to speak, insulin resistance and things like this, that can also influence body weight and composition. And there's many specific diseases that if you have, even though they could be genetic diseases, whatever, that can lead to obesity or changes in body composition. Okay, so how do we treat people? The ideal plan is go on a diet, right, or lose weight. This is great in theory, but I know a whole bunch of people that work in weight loss clinics or endocrinology clinics, and you tell people to go on a diet, lose weight. You tell them they're sick, they need to do this. And a lot of people try, but then they fail, okay, because their lifestyle is not different. They're still in the same environment, right? And so we have to resort to some other extremes. So we tell them to control energy intake. So this, we'll talk about this in a minute, how we can actually treat, but this is the three components of losing weight is energy intake, physical activity. Remember, there isn't a lot. Our BMR, we can't change too much. Our muscle mass can influence it some. Thermic effect of food, not a whole lot. That's a small component. But this physical activity is the one that we have the most control over, right? So you control your calories in, and the physical activity is going to be your tightest control over the calories going out. So that's where we can regulate. And a huge key to all of this is behavior, right? And it's hard to change human behavior, okay? I repeatedly said in the beginning of class, don't procrastinate. And I have 13 students still trying to turn in their assignment, all right? So it's hard to change behavior, okay? And so for people that get in this rut, get in this bad eating pattern, whatever it may be, it's hard to change that. So some common behavioral control tactics that people typically use, and they can work, but again, long-term effects of this are variable, is to break chains. And this is typically where you associate eating a food with some sort of environmental cue or habit. The classic example is you go to the movies, all right, this is my excuse, and I can have the popcorn, the big monster popcorn, bag of popcorn, right? So being aware of that and trying to break it. The other is stimulus control. This is a perfect example for me. I'm horrible around junk food. Because if I walk by it, it actually talks to me, and it says, eat me. And I feel obligated, because I'm a nice guy, to eat it. So my ideal situation would be not buy it, not have it around. But when you have two kids, they go trick-or-treating, and this crap shows up in your house, and it's sitting there staring at you. What do you do, right? So for some people, they can do it. They can have it, and they can have a little piece of something, whatever, when they want. It's controlled. But for some people, it's much more difficult to do. Okay, and so kind of knowing your situation, and if they're not there, you can't eat them, right? So that's one way, but that's hard to do when you're living in the dorms or various other things. Another one is it's called cognitive restructuring. It's really changing your behavior in the sense that the example I use is when you have a stressful day, you know your fallback is that pint of Ben & Jerry's, or it's whatever it may be. And knowing that these two are associated and trying to break that, it's a little bit like chain breaking and saying, okay, I had a bad day. Instead of going and indulging in a pizza or a big bowl of ice cream, I'm going to go for a run instead, okay, or go for a walk or do some yoga or whatever it may be. Finding something else to take that place. The other one is preparing for situations. So, the example is when you go home to your family or you have a big holiday. Holidays are the big one, right? Everybody puts on weight during the holidays. So preparing for that, saying, okay, I'm not going to go over to the appetizer table for 3 hours before the meal, or whatever it may be. And then the big one, the one I would stress the most, is just being aware of what you eat. This is perhaps the most eye-opening thing that people can do, is simply writing down what you eat over the course of a day. I mean, I'm sure for you guys, just for doing your dietary assessment for 2 days, I bet it opened your eyes to a few things, right? And if you would do that, I mean, you were probably subconsciously going, oh, I have to do this class, so I'm not going to have that Snickers bar today, right? Some of you probably did that. That's okay. That's normal. But if you really think and you really write down and look at everything you eat, it's so easy to focus on the good stuff and kind of just forget about, those things that we're not supposed to have, right? So this alone, they've done these studies, and just by keeping a food log, people typically lose weight. So just being aware of that. So to maintain weight loss, so a lot of people that go on diets will actually lose weight, okay, short term. But the real key is maintaining it. Roughly, I don't know what the statistics are, but it's over 90% of people that go on a diet, if they lose weight, gain it back. Sometimes they gain it back plus some, okay, a little extra bonus. So what the book says, which I put a little asterisk by here because I'm not 100% sure I believe it, says eat a low-fat, high-carb diet. And the reason I have this asterisk there, it depends what you mean by high-carb diet. So if you're eating carbs in the form of sugar or starches or things like this, probably not. But if you're eating it high in things like vegetables, whole grains, or fruits, these should be the staple of your diet, okay? And also, I would argue, a fairly good protein source in there as well. It's going to keep you feeling full. Eating breakfast, there's been a lot of... How many of you have heard eating breakfast will help you lose weight? Yeah, some of you. There's been a lot of debate about this topic lately. And I think there's a growing... I don't want to say a fight brewing, but of whether or not skipping some breakfast is good or bad for you, okay? And I don't know if I want to get into that because it's really, really complicated. But we do know if you skip breakfast, what it can do, depending on your diet and the person and everything else, you can indulge more later in the day. So you overeat at lunch, you overeat at dinner, okay? But I would say for most people, having a good breakfast is probably, especially something high in fiber and protein, which will keep you full, keep you satiated, okay, is probably a good thing. And there's this saying, many of you maybe heard this, breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, dinner like a pauper. And so there is some evidence suggesting that breakfast, should be perhaps your biggest meal of the day in terms of calories, and then you decrease your calories as you go out through the day. This might be the most beneficial, but that's still debatable. The self-monitoring, we talked about keeping a dialogue, keeping it on track. And a big one, I won't show you the statistics, but if you look at people that have successfully lost weight and kept it off, one of the key ingredients in most of them is they have some sort of physical activity routine. They work out, they're a walker, they're a runner, they're a biker, they're a swimmer, they do something, okay? This is probably one of the key points in trying to maintain weight loss. Okay, so I'm going to talk about fad diets a little bit. We talked about a few diets in this class, but as you guys know, you go to the bookstore and you can find anybody with any initials after their name, doesn't matter what those initials are, feel they're qualified to write a diet book, right? And I don't want El Capitan. Okay, and so some of these are very entertaining. I try and avoid reading these at all possible costs, but some of these have some decent principles in them, But some of them are very, you know, that you eat one thing for 3 days, and it's very extreme, kind of nuts. But they all, I mean, they're making these because they sell, and whoever's writing them makes money. Okay, it's that simple. It's a business thing. So something to watch out for is when they're advertising, if you want to try a diet, for example, and you're trying to see some red flags, anything that promotes really rapid weight loss is probably not going to work long term, okay? This is what we consider a fad diet. That's just not the way the body works unless you stop eating altogether. So in our fat tissue, if you take a chunk of our adipose tissue, you take a pound of it, there's roughly 3,500 calories in there. Okay, so that's like a day and a half's worth of calories for you guys to put on a pound of fat. So ideally what you would like to do to lose weight, you don't want to lose this in a day. Okay, that would be very difficult. You want to lose this gradually, a few hundred to 500 kilocalories a day to lose weight. So if you lose 500 a day, that's a week, you lose a pound. So it's a nice slow weight loss. This is what will help you. And we also know the slower you lose your weight, typically, the longer you'll keep it off. If you lose it really fast, chances are you're going to bounce right back, okay, like a yo-yo. And these diets, going back to this whole thing, the diet versus lifestyle, these aren't lifestyle changes. They're just diet changes. And so they don't sustain. So when you go on it, you can't sustain eating grapefruits for 3 days in a row, okay, or for the rest of your life, okay? You need something that's sustainable. Weight loss is always regained, and there's a variety of these extremely low carbs, low fats. There's these novelty diets. There's a ton of weight loss supplements and various things that you can see throughout. Now, I love the advertising campaign for fad diets, all right? This is one I cut out here, and I don't remember what it was. I cut off what it was. So what strikes you about this? We got the before and after picture. Anything strike you that's different? Oh, yeah. So we have a lot going on here, okay? So my favorite, almost every dieting ad or fad diet, and this is pretty big font. Usually it's in tiny font at the bottom after a whole bunch of crap. Results not typical, okay? That's your first cue. So chances are this is not going to happen to you. Okay, so what do we got going on here? So first of all, this diet caused him to get a beautiful tan, right? That's lovely. What else we got? He's happy now, all right? He's like really pissed at the world right here. And here he's like, hey, I got a tan. And check it out, somebody waxed my chest. And I got these new Speedos. And here I'm just kind of like holding my arms down, and now I'm flexing to show my muscles. What else we got going here? Yeah, he's got the tan. I think that's about it. Yeah, maybe he looks a little taller there too. It didn't regrow hair, unfortunately, but otherwise, this is like the master your marketing major, right? Or advertising. This is what you should be doing.
Almost looks like his head is photoshopped.
Yeah, it does look like his head is photoshopped. So they see this all the time, but this is what people plan on. They see this person on the left going, oh, that's me. And then they see this person on the right going, oh, yeah, I can do that. So they buy the book, or they go on the fad diet, or they waste money. This is a tens of billions of dollar industry, is the fad diets, and supplements on top of that is even more. So beware of that. But if nothing else, for entertainment purposes alone, this stuff is really fun. Okay, so the order of treatments that we typically approach these, if you are obese, for example, and you go into a weight loss clinic, this is probably what's going to happen. Okay? They're going to try, first of all, to work with you. They're going to try and change your lifestyle, try and change your diet, get you in some sort of physical activity routine. All right? Like I said, for most people, this is not going to work, but we have to try that. All right? So the behavioral modification is what I'm talking about. The next, one of the next options, depending on the severity of your obesity, is drugs. Okay? And this isn't the fun, happy medicinal marijuana type. This is the ones that there's two different ways that most obesity drugs work. One class, which is most of them, inhibit hunger. Okay, so they try and decrease your food intake. Now, the complications of many of these, as I've told you guys, is it lowers that reward. So people get depressed, they're not happy, and well, bad things happen. Okay, so that's some of the complications. The other one, the other type of lowering body weight is through this drug. You can buy this, you can see this at Walgreens or CVS or wherever now, called Ali or Orlistat. And this actually prevents the fat that you eat from being digested and absorbed, or some of it. So basically those calories in, some of it are going out, okay? So you're not capturing them all. And all of these drugs that are currently used, again, the most weight loss you're going to get is maybe 5 or 10%. That's it. Which can be beneficial metabolically, but if you're 400 pounds, 5 or 10% is not, you're still going to be obese at the end of the day. Okay? Then what we can do is they'll put people on very low-calorie diets. So this is usually an in-clinic thing. When you come in, they can control. Because if you put someone on, and this is like 800 calories a day, right? This is very small. This is like one meal for you per day. And if you tell someone to do that and let them loose in the world, yeah, they're not going to adhere to that, right? So you put them in a clinic, feed them something very low calorie, and then typically where this results is in surgery, okay? More and more, and I'll show you some statistics, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, which is gastric bypass surgery. How many of you have heard of this? Most of you, okay. We're going to talk a little bit about what it is and what it does. Now, most what we're focusing on up here is if you're overweight, but there's also the bottom side, was if you are underweight, and we'll talk about anorexia and bulimia in a little bit here. So if you have a low BMI, and obviously it's eat more energy dense foods, but this is a little bit tricky because a lot of the underlying parts of these problems are psychological. So it's not just, it's really the approach to food in many cases, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so bypass surgery. So, you know what, I've got a little, I'm going to show you guys a little video here real quick, very short one. Oh, maybe there isn't volume to this. Never mind. Thought there was. Okay, so basically they drill a bunch. I'll narrate for you guys. This will be fun. So they don't open you wide open. They drill a bunch of holes in you, and then they go in and essentially excise your stomach. You see how big this thing was? It goes down into this tiny little pocket. Okay, we're talking about the size of a golf ball. Okay, and then they cut this stomach and this part of your small intestine off, and they reconnect here. And this part is all gone permanently. This is irreversible, okay? So this obviously is a static graphic of it. So you're left with just this tiny little pouch, and you're connected way down here in your small intestine. So you went from a stomach that was probably, I don't know, that big to something that big. Okay. This surgery has become very, very prevalent in the United States. So this is an old statistic that you could see back in the late 90s. It started increasing, and I dug up a new one this morning. I know you guys don't have this in your notes.
Types of weight reduction surgery.
Yeah. But this is worldwide now, okay? And you can see these are different types of surgery. This here is called a Roux-en-Y. It's not important that you know it. But there's different types. There's also a band where they actually put a band around your stomach that they can loosen and tighten, okay? So they can control it a little bit more. This, once the surgery's done, is really not much to control, okay? And there's some other types too where they kind of slice the stomach more looking like a banana, but they leave this attached. This is becoming a popular one, and there's some others. But the point is, if you look at all these surgeries in the world now, this is where we're at 2015, we're at about 600 million people are getting this surgery done every year. I mean, this has come a long way in just 12 years. We've went from a little over 100 million to 600 million. And you can see the trajectory here is going up and up and up. And for me, it's a very scary statistic because this is a major surgery, okay? And it is not reversible. So What I want to do is I want to take a minute, break class up a little bit here. And I want you to think. You can do it by yourself. Why don't we do it by ourselves? And it's so crappy out today, and you guys all came to class. We're going to hand this in and get some extra credit points today. How's that? So I want you to think about this. And I want you to imagine, okay? I want you to imagine that you're, let's say you're 400 pounds, all right? And someone approaches you and say, your doctor comes and says, okay, we want to do bypass surgery on you. A, would you do it? And I want you to think about, at least we're going to talk about them, but what you think would be some of the challenges or difficulties or the consequences downstream of this surgery. So you have the surgery, then what are some of the issues you think you could face that you'd have to worry about? Okay? Or benefits. You could write benefits too. But mostly I want you to think about what the complications could potentially be. I'll give you guys maybe a few minutes, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm curious. How many of you said yes to that second question? A few of you. It's kind of a loaded question because I think the answer would partly depend on the circumstances, right? So if you were 400 pounds and you were one of those metabolically healthy people, even though you're obese, would you do this surgery? That might change your mind, right? If you come into your doctor and he says, you're going to die in 5 years unless you have this surgery, then you might be more likely to do it, right? So I think it depends on the context it is in. Although more and more, it used to be the surgery was only done in those people that were really leading to disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, whatever. But now it's starting to happen more and more in other people. What do you think would be some of the difficulties or complications to this? Can you share? Yeah. Yeah, so nutrient deficiency is a huge one. So what would contribute to the nutrient deficiency? Anybody ideas? Yeah, right here. So first of all, your inability to eat as much food, right? You simply don't have the space to eat as much food. So what you eat, you have to make count, right? And so if you're eating less food, you have less available, or you have simply less sources of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, proteins, whatever it may be. What else? Yeah. Say it one more time. Sorry.
Anytime you have surgery, there's the risk of something going wrong.
Well, absolutely. So getting off topic just for a second here. This surgery has a lot of complications. When they first started doing this, the fatality rate was like in the single digits, like 5% or something. So you had a 1 in 20 chance of dying from this surgery. Now it's lower, but it's still, the risk of major complications is usually somewhere in that single digit mark. So I don't know what fatality is now. It depends on who does it, where it's done. But last I heard, it's still like 1%. So there's that. But going back to nutrient deficiencies, in addition to not eating as much food, so the nutrients aren't available, what else would contribute to the nutrient deficiencies?
Would it be because you lost the first section?
So the comment was, would it be because you lost part of your intestine? And that's the big one. So you lose part of your stomach. Remember, really very little absorption happens in the stomach. But that duodenum, that first part of your small intestine, that's where a lot of your absorption happens, okay? And so minerals, vitamins, protein deficiency, all of these things are a major, major concern with these people. Yeah?
Why do they take part of the small intestine and why don't they just
So the question is, why did they take part of the small intestine? I don't know why when they started this that they started doing that. Because when you look back, it's like, that was really stupid, right? Part of the reason, we're getting off topic here, but that's a good question. I think part of the reason this works to some degree is that not only are you restricting calories, but by removing certain parts of your GI tract, you're also taking away certain hormones that affect your food intake, okay? And we know that there's hormones, for example, that tell your brain to eat that are now really low when you do that. So there's both a nutrient calorie part and there's also like this physical part. But the newer ones are actually, this one's screwed up. I don't know what they do that for. The sleeve gastrectomy is where they essentially go in and they take like it almost makes your stomach look like the intestine. It just makes it like a little tube. It makes it smaller. And there appears to be less complications. This is becoming more and more popular. There appears to be less complications with most of the benefits. Okay? So that's it. So what else for complications between nutrient deficiencies? Way in the back. Yeah. They make it smaller than it was originally. So most of these surgeries, it is again a tennis ball or a golf ball. It's very, very small. So that's pretty standard. Yeah. Yeah. So part of this, it's not like they just wheel you in one day, slice you up and kick you out the door. There's a lot of counseling, lifestyle counseling, dietitians work with these people to try and get them to change their diet. But again, you're trying to change human behavior. And this is a problem. I give an example of this. I was at a family function a couple of years ago, and I had a cousin who had this done. And it was one of these things where there was a potluck and everybody bought stuff, right? And you go, there was food galore. And they had just had the surgery a week before. And they came and sat at my table. And the one piece of food they picked out of everything was a piece of cake. And it made me so sad, because you go through something this dramatic, but without changing that behavior and everything, it's just, you're going to have more and more complications when you do this. And, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want to hear what you guys have to say first. But there is counseling, and some people get that, okay? They take nutrient supplements, they watch what they eat, but not always. Yeah?
So when they cut the stomach, that's small, but isn't it pretty common for the people who have the surgery to gain weight back?
So, okay, that's kind of what I was waiting for you guys to bring up. So, this is a very successful surgery for weight loss, okay? Most people lose weight and keep most, if not all of it off. There are some stubborn people, perhaps. Remember, we talked about the competitive eating, how people grow their stomach by eating rice and drinking water. Well, you think about eating normally. If you overeat all the time and stretch your stomach out, it can stretch, okay? It's a muscle. And so there are people, when you do this surgery, that over many years can grow that stomach again. They can stretch it out, okay, and gain weight back. So in that type of surgery, that can happen. The other one that I mentioned is this band they put on. So it's like a heavy-duty rubber band, basically, okay? And what can happen is people overeat and they break the band. This is common, actually. And that's why less and less of that banding is going on, because once it breaks, it's hard to go back in and you can't redo it. It's really complicated. Yeah?
Could people overeat to the point, because doesn't it make their appetite go down?
Yes, it definitely suppresses appetite, because you feel full fast. You eat like 2 bites of something, like, whew, stuffed. So, yeah.
Is there a way that you could break that staple line? Or,
No, the surgical procedure is pretty serious. Yeah. This is pretty. They weld it together, actually. No, that's a joke. You can't. Never mind. Okay, so it's serious. I've never heard of anybody having this type of surgery where they burst it open. Okay, but the band you can. Okay, you actually use duct tape. But anyway, so what other complications? Yeah, right here.
it's related to the bile regurgitation.
The bile.
Yeah, the bile regurgitation.
Yeah, so you're talking about bile flow in the gut? Yeah, so this is an issue too. So they reconnect the bile down here, but if you eat, and you can't eat a lot of food, but if you eat a really high-fat food, that can have complications because the bile flow it's a little dysregulated compared to what it should be. Yeah, so that's a good point. What other complications? So we've got the whole nutrient deficiencies.
You eat a little bit all the time. So what happens if you're stuck in an elevator for 8 hours?
So the comment was you have to eat a little bit all the time. So what if you're stuck in an elevator for 8 hours? Then you're going to be really hungry. What about the other extreme? Okay, this is where I really want to get at. What's the other complication kind of related to that? If you have to eat a little bit all the time. Yeah. How fun is it going to be to go out with your friends or family or partner or whatever for dinner? Right? You're going to order the main entree, take 2 bites, and push it away?
Don't they're allowed to get kids meals?
What? Seriously?
I had a relative that got this.
So if you have bypass surgery, you're allowed to get a kid's meal? Please tell me McDonald's isn't doing that. That would really, really defeat the purpose.
No, but we went out for dinner at a restaurant, and she had ordered kids menu after kids menu.
So,
they have a doctor's note.
wow. You have a doctor? Okay, this is news to me. So you can have a doctor's note that will allow you, if you have bariatric surgery, to get a kid's meal. Wow, that's cool. Do you get a toy? Yeah.
My husband is going to be getting the vertical sleeve in January or February. He actually has a card that you can take with him to show the waiter if there's any questions.
They can. Great. And I have heard, just tangentially, some places that are like trying to have menu items, for example, for people with this type of surgery that are, very nutrient-dense type of foods for this type. This isn't widespread yet, but it may be coming. I mean, you can see the popularity here, right? And so this is something that's coming. So anything else? Any other complications of this you see? Yeah, right here. Good. Okay. You got it. Okay, point. So the question was, if you go in and have this surgery, remember we have these two camps of obese people. We have the obese, somewhat healthy, and then the obese that have all the risk factors for getting diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And what happens once you have the surgery to all those risk factors, right? And all the complications that come with obesity is not just diabetes and heart disease. It's all sorts of things. And actually, do you know, not to get off topic here, do you know when you have this surgery, it lowers mortality, okay? Compared to people that don't have the surgery, match for body weight. Do you know what the number one reason is why these people will live longer than an obese person that doesn't have this? Somebody give me a guess. What disease? What disease would you live longer from by having this surgery? Yeah. Diabetes would be the logical one, but it's not. It's up there. Anybody? What are the big common killers of us? Nope. Good guess. Nope. Good guess. What's that? Nope. Good guess, though. Actually, depression can be that one's tricky. There's some emotional issues with this surgery. What else? What kills us? Heart disease? Diabetes? What else? What's a big one? Bingo. The C word. Cancer. Obesity is a major risk factor for cancer. Did you say in the back? Did I miss it? I'm sorry. Got to give this guy's credit. Obesity is a major driver of cancer, we're figuring out. And when these people lose weight, their incidence of cancer plummets greatly. Okay? So back to your question here, the complications. So that's cancer. One of the most striking things they found when they started doing these surgeries is that they did this in mostly, people that were diabetic and all these complications, is that over 90% of the people that had diabetes, the diabetes was resolved. Completely cured. Okay? And so this has been a tremendous, a lot of excitement in the field now, trying to understand how this works. Okay, so if we could maybe cure diabetes, if we can understand how this cures diabetes, maybe we can implement some sort of other intervention that isn't quite so drastic, okay, or drastic. But it definitely reduces, and it's not simply the weight loss. So people have done the studies where they take people and they do this surgery, or they measure how many calories come in. And then they have people that they didn't do the surgery, but they just restrict those calories, okay? And they're both going to be beneficial, but there appears to be an added benefit of this surgery, and it's probably, again, because you're taking part of the stomach out or small intestine, and it's related to these hormones that talk to your brain and talk to other tissues in your body. But we're still trying to figure out how that works. Okay? That's a great, great question. Any other complications or any questions or comments? Yeah, way in the back. Absolutely. There's a lot of GI-related stuff. There's hernias can be involved, bowel obstructions. They have a thing called, it doesn't sound very pleasant, it's called gastric dumping, okay? Where it's basically, your stomach is there, you eat a meal, and it kind of slowly releases thing into your small intestine. But if you eat something that has a high osmolarity or a lot of sugar, and it all of a sudden goes in your small intestine, it sucks water in, and all of a sudden you get basically explosive diarrhea, okay? So you don't want it. Okay, so there's a lot of issues with this. Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
So we're making the stomach like that small, making that drastic of a step. Why would they make it that small? If they make it like a little more normal size?
So why that size is the question. Why that small? I don't 100% know the answer. I would have to imagine that they have tried bigger sizes and they were less successful. I don't know if that's because the bigger sizes are easier to expand, if it's related because there's still enough of those hormones produced. I'm not 100% sure why. Yeah, I don't know. But this is what's standard done, and it's drastic. I mean, it's very severe.
It being so small, is there any, like, a couple years on the road, any potential for it to kind of go back to a little bit normal of a size? Or
Yeah, it will. It will grow for most people. Like the average person that keeps the weight off, it'll grow a little, just normal stretch. But again, you do have those, I don't know what percentage of people it is that will regain the weight. And now those people really stretch it out because they're really overeating. Now, the concern was, if you look at the numbers here, this hasn't been around that long. And so the real concern is long-term effects of this, right? So most of the data, the people that have studied this, have just looked, okay, what happens 5 years after the surgery? And we know most of the people keep their weight off, but we don't know what's going to happen in 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years. This surgery is being done. I've seen it done. I heard it in the news here about a year ago. It was done in somebody that was like 15, 14, a kid, right? That was massively obese. And talk about a change to your lifestyle. But he was going down this path where they didn't think he'd probably make it to see 30, okay, because he was so sick. So, any other questions or comments? Yeah.
So, like, what happens when I'm doing a surgery that doesn't think like stomach acid in your body or something like that?
Due to the surgery itself? No, they have it pretty. I've never actually seen, I know the main bariatric surgeon here on campus, and I've always wanted to go just watch, because I think it'd be interesting. But no, I think they've got the system down where they can contain stomach acid and everything, because you got to be careful if the GI tract contents aren't sterile, obviously, right? So if they spill out into your sterile body cavity, there can be complications. So, but no, I think they've got that pretty much down. So the question is, yeah, do they put restrictions on? This is a good question. I can't say it today. I know it wasn't so long ago. It was only people, first of all, you had to have a certain level of obesity, okay? It's not like you're 25 pounds overweight and they're going to say, okay, we're going to cut your stomach out. That's not going to happen. But you have to reach a certain threshold of obesity. And you also have to basically fail some of these preceding treatments. So they try the diet behavior, they try the drugs, they try all that. If those don't work, then they do this. So this is not a first-line defense, although I think that's starting to shift. I think, I know there's places you can go and just have it done. You can just say, I have the money, give me this surgery, okay? So that is happening. I don't know if this is moved up in that order of treatment, though, if there's clinics. I'm sure there's clinics that this might be, okay, you're overweight, we know diet doesn't work, we know drugs don't work, we're just going to go to the surgery. I imagine that is probably happening in some places. I don't think it is here, though. But, and some people, I mean, well, I don't want to go down that path. Anyway, yeah. What happens to the part that's cut out? Is that what you mean? It's gone. They take it out. Yeah, it's completely removed. Okay, so it is gone forever. I don't know what they do with it. I don't want to know. Yeah. Gut bacteria. This has a big impact on gut bacteria. There's been a lot of interest in this, and for sure, talking about why this works, we were talking about calories, we were talking about these gut hormones, but also the gut bacteria play a big role in this. And so we were talking about swapping poop and swapping bacteria and all this stuff, right? So they did this in mice. They got mice really fat, and they did this surgery on mice, which is very slimy, very tiny. And then what they did is those mice lost weight, and they took the bacteria from them and put them in other obese mice, and those mice lost the weight, too. So this surgery results in a change in your gut bacteria that in itself might be a driving factor in this whole process, too. So this is a very complicated network, obviously, but definitely it affects. Now, it's partly due to less calories coming in. It could be related to all these hormones. I mean, who knows? There's a lot going on, but that's definitely a big player in this, for sure. So, okay. So one of the questions, question is there any non-surgical way of shrinking your stomach in order to lose weight? not any good ways. We talked about expanding it. You guys are competitive eaters. I mean, the only thing you can do on a day-to-day basis is when you eat a meal, don't stuff yourself, all right? We'll talk about this later in this semester about aging, okay, and how overeating and things like this can actually speed up the aging process. But there's places where they have a rule of like stop eating when you feel 70 or 80% full, okay? So when you're done eating, you should feel content but not full, okay? So if you're never really making that stomach full, I don't know if it can shrink much, but it definitely won't expand, okay? So that's my answer to that question. So the next question is related to eating disorders, and I'm not going to answer it because I'm going to go right into this. We're going to talk about that in class, so I'm going to go into it right about it now. Before we get into that, sorry, Homer. So in this episode, Homer actually gains, I don't know how much weight, because then he can get disability from work and not have to work at the nuclear power plant. But the reason I'm putting this up here is we talked about energy balance and energy weight balance and all this. Okay, so what are the ultimately, of all this stuff we've talked about, what ultimately are the two factors that's regulating Homer's weight here? What are the two things that dictate his body weight? Yes?
How much you eat and how much you have
It's very simple. Calories in, calories out. Okay? How many know the first law of thermodynamics? Or is it the second one? Now he's going to mix that, right? Energy is conserved in a system, right? Same thing. He's a closed system. Energy just not disappear. There's calories coming in, calories going out. Now, having said that, there are things that our body does sometimes that can change its equation. Sometimes you hear, oh, a calorie is not a calorie, or a calorie is a calorie. I hate that crap, right? Did you guys have this conversation recently? Oh, really? Okay. A calorie is a calorie, okay? But how we use that calorie or metabolize it in our body can be different. For example, we look on the back of our box of Fruit Loops, right, and it says 9, 4, and 4 for calories. But again, those have to be available to your body. So if your gut bacteria change, or you have some sort of GI thing or genetic thing or whatever, or the food matrix, the food in which you're eating, some of that energy is bound up and you can't get, that changes that number, okay? The calories out, we're assuming calories out is energy expenditure, right? Which is true. But remember, that energy expenditure can be broken into two parts. ATP, which we use, and we'll use that ATP to make fat if we have extra energy, and heat. So if you change that ratio, okay, we talked about that brown fat stuff, right? That essentially makes you still have the calories coming out, but there's less calories available for you to gain weight, okay? So that's why I get mad when they say a calorie, not a calorie. A calorie by definition is a calorie, and it's not going to change. But how our body handles them, what's available to our body, and once they're in, what it does, that's what dictates body weight, okay? Any questions on this? All right. So the last little part we're going to talk about here are some eating disorders. And these are especially relevant for your guys' demographic because both anorexia and bulimia, which is the next one I'm going to talk about, is very prevalent in teenage and your guys' age group of females especially. Guys, we don't really care what we look like. Girls do. And so what anorexia is really... It's an altered image of your body, and even if you're skinny, you think you look overweight or obese or fat, okay? And basically these people starve, essentially, okay? So they just simply do not eat the calories, which is different from bulimia I'll talk about in a minute. So the treatment for this, and there's lots of complications with this. The book goes in a little bit more detail, and there's... Actually, if any of you ever heard of the Emily program, so any of you who's interested in nutrition, the Emily program is a place here in the Twin Cities that's really phenomenal that works with eating disorders. So anybody that wants to be a dietitian or whatever, it might be a good place to go check out and shadow some people. but the university works with them very closely. So to treat these people, there has to be nutrition therapy, but also the psychological therapy is the biggest thing. Okay, food is not your enemy. Your body is fine the way it is. Okay, you don't need to look. And I mean, part of this is the stupid society we live in, where every model on the cover of a magazine or whatever is a twig, right? And that's not 99% of us. Okay. The other eating disorder is bulimia. And this one's a little bit different. This isn't so much the fear of eating. It's usually people eat. They indulge, and then they feel that guilt, and then they usually vomit, okay? Or use laxatives to clean everything out. And it's this really nasty cycle, okay? So it's usually eating a lot, gorging, and then clearing out. And this can have lots of consequences. For example, frequent vomiting can have some severe effects on your esophagus. All that acid coming up all the time, basically burn a hole in it. Laxatives you can have effects on nutrients, all sorts of things, and I'll show you these in a minute. And again, treatments, although they're subtly different, they're both nutrition and psychological. And this just gives you some ideas, and I'm not going to go over all the details here, but you can see the wide spectrum of complications or issues related to this, from hair loss, your immune system's impaired, changes in metabolic rate, obviously your menstrual cycle gets all screwed up, or it's gone altogether, all sorts of things. So it's very, very severe. So how to prevent these? I mean, these are fairly common sense. I'm not going to spend much time on these. Is really just having a good approach to food, a good approach to your body image, acceptance of your image. And I think probably more than anything is many of these people that are in this have psychological issues, whether it be depression, bipolar, whatever it may be. So having a supportive environment is important. And I just put this link up here. If you or anyone you know has issues with this, UMN has a clinic that will help people with this. So with that, I will let you guys go for today, and we will talk about exercise on Tuesday. So have a fantastic... Oh, yeah. Hand those in. Why don't we slide to this aisle, and then... whoa. Run away. Slide to this aisle and then bring it down.